Today we're going to be painting another copy of this Tech Priest Enginseer. So the request was to mimic this model, which we had done before for a previous person, and now we're going to do that same scheme on this model. So I have a perfect reference here for me, but I did use the book and the website in order to glean reference images of what this model looked like when it was finished. Has an interesting sepia tone on the metals. And then our backpack here. So we're going to start with our zenithal with the white, which again, more of a controlled zenithal. Starting with our white ink, we're going to lay down some nice solid whites on the areas that we want to be bright red. So I'm starting with the front of the cloak on the head here. Not super concerned about it rolling over. And I'm building up real slow. Little tiny squirts followed by much more air coming through the airbrush. Just to make sure that white gets super vibrant. And I'm going to blend it out just a little bit. Whenever you spray for a long time, you might have to clear out your brush to get it spraying well again. And then down here on the cloak. So what I mean when I say that I'm clearing out my brush, I'm taking my brush to the side and I'm doing some strong pulls on my paper towel just to make sure I'm not building up too much dry tip, or that my paint's not clogging ink in this case. Might need a little bit more pressure for the speckles. Trying to save you guys' ears. So in airbrushing, if you're seeing something get overly speckled, that means your paint is not thin enough or your pressure is too low. Those are two variables to always take into consideration. He's also got red on the front of his cloak, so we're going to address that. Make sure we don't miss it. On the inside of his cloak is tan, so we're going to hand paint that. Again, focusing on that high point. Blending it out a little bit, but just making sure we got a nice strong highlight down here. We're not going for any dramatic lighting or anything like that, just nice color transitions. Nice rich colors. For our cloak. Alright, we're going to move on to the next step, which is our red. Got my contrast Blood Angels red loaded up in my airbrush. And we're going to do a broad overcoat on this. Now this, we're not concentrating on any areas. We just want to tone everything that's going to be red with this contrast, even the black. Because when we're hitting the black, it's shifting it to that warm, almost terracotta, or an umber. And again, slow, making sure that anything that's blocking my paint, I make sure that I'm hitting from different angles so I don't get an airbrush shadow. Just a shadow that's been introduced by a part masking itself. If I move this guy out of the way, it won't focus on it. Clearing out my airbrush. Just layering in that red, nice and soft. See, even if we're speckly, This almost acts like a glaze to blend it out. So don't be too worried if you get speckly with it. You'll blend out, we get a nice smooth contrast, or fade with that red. There is a lot of contrast in these bands. Using warm and cool colors. Hit the edge, and I'm just looking for any areas that are still kind of white. I don't want to leave behind any sort of pinks. Next we're going to load up our yellow. I'm using the yellow ink from Vallejo. I just put that right on top of my red, so I'm spraying out my red until it turns yellow. There's no reason not to. Don't need to do an extra step of cleaning. Now I'm just putting this on top of the red. Add a little bit of punch. Give it some more warmth. And just in case, it can knock out some of my pink areas and turn them yellow. So now we got a decent airbrush finish. It's time to move on to the steel. So from here, I'm going to airbrush this guy, get my palette ready, and then add my Vallejo steel Model Air color. So now it's time to add our steel. We're using the Model Air steel. This is an air color, but it paints really well, and with that I want to use a older brush, one that I don't care as much about, because the metallic pigments are very rough on brushes. Now the benefit to this paint is it coats super well. You can see even in these super dark areas, one brush stroke covers, and it covers well. It goes on very thin. I want to hit every area that's going to be metal with this, and I will go back and paint the gold over the steel. That just helps for coverage with the gold. Got all my metals painted on this guy, so this is kind of where you want to be. You can be sloppy in some areas because we're going to paint over them, but for the most part, avoid your reds. That's the important bit to avoid. We're going to hit that with a black wash, but before we do that, we're going to get the backpack. For that, we're just going to airbrush it because it's a majority of steel and it makes it an easy step. You could use like one of the metal color airbrush colors. I had this out, so, and it's a Tuesday, so I feel like airbrushing it. Airbrushing it with a different color. I might regret it because the steels can be kind of a pain. Looks like it's going to cooperate with me today, so I'm going to finish painting this up and then we'll move on to washes. Now we're going to add our Seraphim Sepia. That's the basis for this kind of more aged looking Enginseer armor. Again, I like to go heavy with my washes and then push them around on the figure if I need to. Instead of going light. If you go light, they'll dry faster, get streaky, and I like to avoid the streaky look. Go finish this up on all of our metal bits, and we'll go back and we'll paint do some golds next. For our gold steps, we're going to use this Vallejo liquid gold. Now you would want to shake this stuff really well. I use a crappy brush when applying this stuff. This is just a, who knows, little synthetic brush. Let me grab the guy here. And it goes on really nice. The only downside to it is it dries pretty quick and it can get gummy, so you need to reclose your container and reshake it. And I just paint right out of the cap with it because it doesn't thin with water. It is alcohol cleanup for this stuff. You can use a little bit to thin it, but if you use too much, it can break it down. So I have a bottle of alcohol that's pretty much, I stick the brush in there and rattle it around, clean it off when I get done. But you can see how nice it goes on, and coats and covers. We're going to hit all our areas on the backpack and on this guy with that gold. Got that sepia finished up. So now I'm going to take a little bit of nun oil and hit his gun with the nun oil. That's the only place that I'm going to hit with that. And then I'm going to use some Reichland flesh shade right here on the axe. I'm also going to put Reichland flesh shade on our little gold bits that we added here and there. So here I'm going to add some of this flesh shade just to show you what it does. Brings out those tones, gives you a rich red tone that goes with the rest of the model. And then just a little bit over this area here because of the way that it looks in the art. And I'll do the back side of that as well. Add some on that little spike there. This pokey end. So now that everything's washed, we're going to go back and lighten it up a little bit by dry brushing. Now this is a very controlled dry brush of our steel. And we're just brightening up those areas that get wear and tear a little bit more than others. I'm using these brushes from Knights of the Game Table. These little tiny dry brushes work good for getting in on all the little bitty cracks and crevices and places that would normally be pretty hard to reach with like a bigger dry brush. So it's a handy little tool to have. Hitting all of our metal, even the gold and stuff. Lighter in some areas, and where it's like really dark, some, I can brighten that up a little bit just by kind of shifting your brush stroke from a sweep to like a push and drag. I'm gonna reload and finish up this dry brush. After our dry brush, we're gonna add a quick little detail bit to the handle. Here we're going to take a little bit of our red ink. I'm using red ink because I want to keep the shine and make it look a little bit different, and it's going to flow into our cracks here on the handle, so it's like he's got a red metallic handle that he's holding on to. Just being careful not to get it anywhere that it's not supposed to be. Now we're taking our Pro Acryl Coal Black, and we're going to be painting all the tubes and hoses with that. This guy has green, but to keep this model in line with the rest of the army, we're going to go ahead and use the black, and then this little center section here. This gives us an opportunity to clean up our overages. Again, we're using acrylic, so it's okay to go fast and loose with some of the steps, and then tighten in on others. After we get our black laid in, I'm going to take some of this Space Wolfy blue. Again, this is sample paint. Just getting it used up. And then start adding our highlights. So across here, just kind of hit the ticks. Little spikes sticking out of his handle. And sort of a top highlight. Here, work it down. Hit the spikes on the back side too. For the tubes, kind of ride your brush along the top. Let it hit the high points a little bit more. Any of these other hoses back here under his armpits. Highlight. And go through. Let me show you the backpack because I haven't shown that a little bit. So we got our gold spots. We got our dry brush on there. Our sepia is coming through nice, and we got all our hoses black. We're going to highlight that. So now we're going to take our Signar blue highlight. That is our pop color for this army. We're going to paint all our lenses and little energy bits. For lenses, I kind of like to go around the outside of the ring just a little bit for that kind of almost OSL look. And I'm thinking like maybe the little buttons here, there's a little readout on his wrist. We'll get that. Not much else would be blue on him. He's got this little lens up here, so he's got the 3 eyes. And then on the backpack, this little coil, whatever, this little thing. And then I think the eye of the, they did it as silver in the box art. So we'll do it as blue on this guy and do the lens blue as well. Once you get your blue on, it's time to add blue wash just to give you some shadow in those areas. So I'm going to take my liner and add it. I'll seep into all those little cracks and stuff. Give it some darker tones. Make those areas separate from the other ones. And then give it some shadow for our little OSL-ish effect. So a wise man once said you can't have shadow without light. Or light without shadow. And then on the backpack is really just the eye of the skull here and this little flashlight. So you can see in the dark when he gets up in the middle of the night to pee. And then really just the bottom edge of this bulb. It's like a police bulb. It has a light inside of it. It swirls around. While that wash dries on our blue, we can start laying in our Terran khaki, because we're going to need several layers of this in our inner cloak areas. So in that spot and in this spot. So we got back here, need a few coats. We're going to add our trim, so he gets a little line that goes along his cloak here. And then all of the belts, pouches, and the holster. So these guys, and we're going to do a contrast over these. Snakebite leather. And the belt. And we'll leave the little strap on the coat red. We'll just highlight that up. So hit these areas. The skull on the backpack can also receive this color. So we'll go ahead and paint that skull up, because we can do a skeleton horde wash on it. Contrast. Sorry. We got a couple coats of the khaki on. You can still see some of the base color through. That's okay. Gonna let that dry. Jump back to our lenses. We're gonna highlight up a little bit using some white mixed in. Can use any white. And come in, hit some edges. The side of some of these buttons here, and then for our lenses we'll do our little swoosh. Bottom side of the lens. There. Don't have anything else blue there. Get this little top highlight here, maybe a little streak down the side, and then for the, I'm going to pull my pin out, for the light bulb, just the top side, drag it down the bulb, not all the way, so you have kind of a transition, and then just the top of the eye here. So we got some transitions, and then we'll go back. You can add another layer if you want. The more layers, the smoother your transitions, more intricate. Same thing here. Hit that little guy real quick. The outside of the eyeball there. We can pull a finer line down the side here. and then just work toward a final white highlight. The more steps, again, the smoother the paint job, but also the more time and more challenging it gets to add those small tiny little layers. I'll hit the eye with a highlight too. Now we got a little bit of brightness. And then go back, get a little bit more of that mixed up blue. Yep, that's a green guy. Wrong Ninja Turtle. And a little bit of a swoosh. Sides of the buttons. Smaller little swoosh on the inside of the lenses here. Almost a dot, really. And then just take pure white. Make sure it's wet. Little highlights in our lenses there, and then do a highlight here. You can also do like little streaks. So if you want to do like a couple little streaks across the screen, just like a little touch of white on those guys. And don't forget these, because I did. Brighten up the blues on your buttons here. And then inside this little square, kind of like painting an eyeball, get in there and drag a line across and highlight it. Add some detail to that. So I'm going to go and continue to do some layers on this tan, and then we'll look at highlighting it. Time for our contrast snakebite leather. Putting this on the straps and belts, pouches and things of that nature, using our liner. And just put it on. Give us a nice deep, dark, rich brown for these areas. And again, go heavy. Let it pool because it's creating shadows. Just move it around. Control it in the areas that you're putting it, and kind of pay attention to where it's building up. And then we're going to do that on the holster and on the belt that's going around, so we're going to completely change the tone of that color going around. And then for the skull, we're just going to do the same thing, but with the skeleton horde. Now we just need to add a few highlights to our skull, since we got our skeleton horde on there. So it's a new day, new brush. Take a newer brush and just add some interesting little points here to this skull. Highlight the brow, nose, kind of go across the teeth there and pick them up. Maybe back here a little bit. Lick the brush, get that paint moving again. So now we got a skull, and that'll be it for this part. This part's done. Our tan's on nice and solid now, so we can start highlighting it. And that color that we just used for the skull would be perfect, because it is that Terran khaki, just mixed up just a little bit. And so I'm going to go in here and do some broad highlighting, just to create some interest here, and follow along the pattern a little bit toward the bottom again, because we're maintaining those edges and interest. And as it gets higher up here on the shoulder, just go ahead and push it up. And then on the inside of the cloak, especially here, I'm going to highlight into here and just move it up the inside of the cloak. And then I even painted way up here, if you can see past the act, because like a little bit of the inside of the cloak is showing. And then with these jacket highlights, I'll go up 2 steps. Edge highlight at the edge there. Now that this is dry up here, kind of give an example how I'll finish out the whole ring. Pull this line, get a nice edge on it. So just kind of edge highlight around and add some accent lines toward the top, and then all the way along the bottom. You can see the difference that makes in the way the cloak looks. And then we'll move on to our red highlights. For our red highlights, going with the Khador red base and the Khador red highlights. Once I have that added to my palette, I'll mix up just a little bit of a step up of our Khador red with the highlight in it, and then we'll start hitting edges along the cloak. These big extreme shoulder folds. Getting them in there, and you can see the difference between that side and this side now. It really brightens it up without having to coat anything. You're just putting an edge on. Being real careful, just tickling it in there. Getting those nice hard edges. And then back here on these little folds, I might just use the pure Khador red instead of the brought up one, because we're going into such a dark area. I'm just adding a little bit of a highlight here on the back side of the cloak, just to pull those shapes out a little bit more so you can see them. And then brush lick and blend it a little bit. And then we'll go around and hit all the bottom edges of the cloak, these little folds and things. And same process. For our flesh tone, we're going to use a mix of dark flesh and our space wolfy blue. And then just to take a little bit of the saturation out, these Admech guys are pretty sickly. I think they'd have some like better health practices, but your skin always looks like it's about to fall off. And carefully get in a base coat in here. This is something that you could do like right after the red. Since we're airbrushing the red, you just kind of paint over it. Now I'm going to finish this off camera. Once we got that on, take a little bit of our Gilliman flesh and our liner. Just get it in there around the face. It'll add like a little bit more warmth back to our kind of bluey color. Wipe off my brush when it gets too pooled. I like to pool them in the eye sockets pretty intense, and then kind of pull out. That way I got kind of a well-developed shadow in the eye socket. And then when this dries, I'll go in and paint the eyeball. After that wash dries, you're going to go in and I'm going to try and show off a painted eyeball while struggling to keep the camera looking at it. Either show off or embarrass myself. Got a little bit on the inside of the cloak there, but we hit the right spot for the eyeball. And then I'm going to dot that off camera. We got our eyeball in there. We fixed our little white spot on the inside of the cloak. And now I'm going to take some more of this sunny skin tone. Dark flesh, sorry, it's not sunny skin tone. It looks sunny, like this is pretty light flesh. It's intense flesh. I'm gonna go in, add a few little highlights here and there just to finish out his skin. And then address the elephant in the room, which is the base. Down there. Maybe need to shut the camera off and try and get those highlights in the eye, but there we go. Just to brighten them up a little bit. So the next thing to address would be the base. I know in some of the previous videos we went and we sprayed that before we started any work on anything else. So happy accident, or I can claim it was on purpose, but I forgot about it. Gotta take some parafilm. Cut off a piece. Peel it from the paper. That there, and we're gonna wrap this around the model, and then anything that's sticking out I'm just gonna hit with, I'm gonna put some sticky tack on or something just to keep the black from getting in there. But I hate painting on sand unless I'm dry brushing. Like I hate it. It's maybe it's a sensory thing. Maybe it's just that it won't go into the stupid cracks like it should. So we're gonna Spider-Man this guy up. Get some web slinging going. It's pretty spiky, so we're gonna have to be careful about pieces sticking out. Probably hit that with some sticky tack as well. But really what I'm going for is just to make sure that I get the sort of back end covered. I can go in and push this back. As long as it's from an angle that won't push paint back into these parts, I'll be fine. So I'm going to airbrush this with black. Put some sticky tack on there and there so I don't hit the tip of my my cloak or have a little black nub on the end, which I'll have to go get. But nope, found some. Easy peasy. Okay, I'm already saving time because I can just drop some black in my airbrush and go to town. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll address the dry brushing and finishing up with the model. Quick and easy. Got that painted. And I'll just do a quick unmask, unwrap. So if you forget a step, there's always a way to remedy it in a pro manner. So you see we got that airbrushed in there. We didn't get any in our red. Had a little bit of an overspray right there. It's fine. Got some little bits of red that we need to take care of right around his feet. But that's it. So we'll get that and then we'll dry brush. Dry brush time. I got my blue gray pale and Arctic white added to my palette on here. Start with the blue gray pale with a little dry brush. Just controlling it, making sure we're not hitting all our hard work. Oh, making sure we're dry brushing the camera too. Cool. Rinse that out. I'm not going to use it anymore for couple hours. Get me another bigger dry brush. Load it up. And work my dry brush around the figure. I have to clean our ring up one more time. So I'd rather get paint on the ring than on that nice cloak. He needs to stay clean for battle. And take some of our white. I already had white on my palette. I just added more. And then we're just going to hit the front with this. And then besides the black ring, we're finished. Well, no, we got glue on the backpack, so might as well do the black ring and then show you guys the finished model. I'm just cleaning up the base here. Got my backpack glued on. You want to make sure every time you glue, you make sure to scrape that paint off that plastic. I'm talking to you, Robert. Telling me you take your plastic glue, put it over your paint. How dare you? How dare you turn your paint into glue? Alright, a clean look. Nice and clean. Alright, last step will be to matte varnish. For that we're using the Army Painter dull coat, matte coat, matte varnish. I think they just named it matte varnish. Let me grab the can. Yeah, this is the brand that I like. It's changed a little bit over the years. It used to be anti-shine because they used it with some of the products that were kind of glossy when they dried. But anyway, I guess they changed it to matte varnish because they weren't selling very much of it. Just to us. Anyway, take this, light sprays over the front, and it will be, well, over all sides. And it will be finished. Doing like a little slow turnaround for you so you can see all the cool little details. Again, this is what we would consider a tabletop mid-level paint. Alright, we'll see you in the next video.